Immigrant waitress fed 2 orphans. 15 years later, a Ferrari showed up in front of her house. Before we continue with the story, tell us where you're watching from and how old you are, and subscribe to our channel to receive new stories every day that will touch your heart. I hope you enjoy the story. The neon glare of Times Square was a garish mockery of the city's true face, a kaleidoscope of bright lights that only seemed to deepen the shadows for a young woman like Alina Petrova. At 25, an immigrant from Russia, she saw New York not as a city of dreams, but as a relentless, unforgiving machine. It chewed up people like her and spat them out, leaving them to fend for themselves in the cold. Her uniform as a waitress at the Gilded Spoon, a ridiculously upscale restaurant, felt less like a costume and more like a second skin of servitude. Every day, she carried trays laden with dishes that cost more than her weekly groceries, serving them to people who saw her not as a person, but as a silent, foreign object, a temporary fixture in their opulent world. Her small apartment in Queens was little more than a bed and a kitchen she barely had time to use. Her salary was a cruel joke, a meager sum that barely covered the rent, the cost of the cheap bus pass, and the money she sent home to her family in a small village outside Moscow. Her mother's letters were filled with longing and worry, and Alina's heart ached with every ruble she had to scrape together. Her Russian accent, a gentle lilt that her mother had always called beautiful, was a liability here, a sign of her otherness. It was a constant reminder that she didn't belong, that she was a stranger in a strange land. The condescending smiles and dismissive waves of her customers were tiny cuts that added up to a gaping wound of invisibility. The only flicker of hope in her grey existence was her dream. In the quiet hours after her shift, when the clatter of silverware and the cacophony of a bustling kitchen had faded, she would sit at her tiny table, sketching recipes in a worn-out notebook. Her grandmother, a woman whose hands had known the soil and the secret ways of herbs, had taught her to cook not just with ingredients, but with heart. Alina knew she had the talent, a passion that burned bright and hot within her. She longed to trade her waitress apron for a chef's toque, to create something beautiful, something of her own, instead of just serving the creations of others. It was on a particularly bitter winter night, the kind of night that sinks into your bones and chills you to the soul, that Alina's world began to change. She was taking out the trash bags, the heavy, greasy sacks, a stark contrast to the delicate plates she had carried all evening. The alley behind the Gilded Spoon was a black canyon of cold, smelling of rotting food and city grime. The wind howled, whipping her cheap scarf around her face. She was about to toss the bag into the dumpster when she saw them. Tucked between 2 overflowing garbage cans, huddled together for warmth, were 2 children. A boy, perhaps 10 years old, with eyes that were too old and too tired for his face, and a little girl, maybe 8, clinging to his side like a frightened kitten. They were shivering, their clothes thin and dirty, their faces smudged with a mix of soot and fear. Their large, dark eyes met hers, and something deep within Alina's chest tightened. They were like 2 lost birds, frozen and alone. "Da," the boy whispered, his voice thin and cracking from the cold. He looked at the trash bag in her hand, then at the restaurant door, a silent plea in his eyes. Alina's heart, which she had thought was a solid block of ice, melted in an instant. She didn't think about the rules, about her strict manager, or about the fact that she could lose her job. All she saw were 2 hungry children, so much like the ones she saw in her own village, but here, in this unforgiving city. "Wait here," she said softly, her Russian accent more pronounced than usual from the emotion in her voice. "Don't move." She rushed back inside, her mind racing. She went to the kitchen, her hands trembling as she scavenged what she could from the food that was about to be thrown out. A slice of roast beef that was too small for a plate, a couple of rolls that were slightly stale, a bowl of leftover mashed potatoes. The head chef, a stern Frenchman named Jean-Pierre, was nowhere to be found. She stuffed the food into a bag, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She was terrified of being caught, but the image of those two children was all she could see. She returned to the alley, her feet crunching on the frozen ground. The children were still there, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and hope. "Here," she said, kneeling down and handing them the bag. "It's not much, but it's warm." The boy, Ivan, took the bag and looked at her. "Spasibo," he said, his voice thick with gratitude. "Thank you." The little girl, Sophia, just stared at her with a look of pure wonder. She reached out a small hand, and Alina, without thinking, took it. It was cold, but Alina felt a warmth spread through her. For the next 3 weeks, this became their secret ritual. Every night after her shift, Alina would bring them food. Sometimes it was just a few rolls. Other times it was a small bowl of soup. She would sneak it out, her heart in her throat, praying that her manager wouldn't notice. In the dim light of the alley, they would talk. She learned their names, their story. Their parents had been immigrants too, but had died in a tragic accident. They had been on their own for weeks, trying to survive. Alina became their secret guardian, their angel in the darkness. "You are an angel," Sophia whispered to her one night, her small hand clutching Alina's sleeve. Alina's heart ached with a bittersweet mix of love and sorrow. She wasn't an angel, she was just a waitress, a nobody. But in that moment, in that cold, dark alley, she was everything to them. They were a testament to the fact that even in this hard city, kindness could still exist. And in their big, trusting eyes, Alina saw a reflection of her own forgotten hope. This small act of charity, born of a fierce maternal instinct, was a bond that was forming silently, a lifeline between 3 lost souls in the sprawling anonymity of New York. The cruel hand of fate was swift and unforgiving. It manifested not as a natural disaster or a tragic accident, but in the sneering face of Arthur Vance. He was the manager of the Gilded Spoon, a man whose arrogance was as sharp and polished as the silverware on his tables. He saw the world in black and white, those who belonged and those who served. And in his world, a Russian immigrant like Alina was firmly in the latter category. For him, her existence was a mere detail, a replaceable cog in the machine of his restaurant. One evening, as Alina cleared a table, her head down, a sense of unease crept over her. The air in the dining room, usually filled with the soft clinking of glasses and hushed conversations, felt heavy and still. She saw Arthur Vance standing by the service door, a look of cold fury on his face. He wasn't just looking at the door, though. He was looking at her, and his eyes were full of a terrible certainty. He had caught her. He marched across the polished floor, his polished shoes clicking on the marble, each step a declaration of his authority. He stopped right in front of her, his tall, imposing figure casting a shadow over her small frame. The dining room fell silent. All eyes were on them. "Alina Petrova," he began, his voice low and menacing, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "I've been told you have a side business." Alina's heart stopped. She could feel the blood drain from her face. She tried to speak, but her throat was dry. "Oh, don't pretend you don't know," he sneered, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "Feeding those street urchins with our food, as if this is some kind of charity kitchen." The words hung in the air, a public indictment. Customers stared, their expressions a mix of curiosity and disdain. A woman at a nearby table clutched her pearl necklace, as if Alina's presence might contaminate her. I wasn't," Alina stammered, her voice a thin, reedy whisper. "They were just so hungry." "Hungry?" Arthur laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "That is not your concern, Alina. Your concern is to do your job, not to steal from my business to feed Bums. The word was like a slap. Do you think this is a soup kitchen? You should be grateful you even have this job, you ungrateful immigrant. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a wad of cash. Here, he said, throwing the money onto her tray. This is what you're owed. Now get out. I don't want to see your face here again. I'll make sure everyone in this city knows what kind of thief you are. Alina stood there, frozen. The money, a meager sum, seemed to burn where it lay on the metal tray. The public humiliation was a brand on her soul, a mark that she felt she would carry forever. Her face burned with shame, and her eyes, filled with tears, met the cold, hard gaze of Arthur Vance. She turned and walked out, not daring to look back, the whispers and stares of the customers, a physical weight on her shoulders. She stumbled out of the restaurant, into the cold night, the shame and the cold of the city, a bitter combination. She had lost her job, her only source of income, and her dream of becoming a chef felt like a distant, impossible fantasy. She walked aimlessly, the tears finally coming hot and salty against her frozen cheeks. What would she tell her family? What would she do now? The thought of her mother's worried face made her heart ache with a physical pain. But even in this darkness, a tiny ember of hope flickered. It was the thought of Ivan and Sophia. They were her responsibility now, a silent promise she had made to them in that cold alley. She couldn't abandon them. Desperate and afraid, she went back to her small apartment. She had little food, but what she had, she shared. Every night, Ivan and Sophia would come to her fire escape, and she would pass them a small bowl of soup or a piece of bread, a meager offering, but one given with all the love she had. Her situation, however, brought her closer to someone else who understood the sting of being an outsider, David Chen. He was a gentle, quiet man, a widower who owned the small corner grocery store where Alina shopped. He was a second-generation Chinese immigrant, and he knew the silent prejudice that Alina faced every day. He had watched her for weeks, admiring her quiet strength and the way she held her head high despite the constant stream of small daily insults. One afternoon, Alina was in his store, her basket almost empty, her face pale and drawn. David, seeing her distress, finally spoke. "You look sad, Alina," he said softly, his voice a balm to her weary heart. "Is everything okay?" Alina, who had been holding back her tears for days, finally broke down. She told him everything, the public humiliation, the loss of her job, the fear for her family. She told him about Ivan and Sophia, about their hungry faces and their trusting eyes. David listened, his kind eyes never leaving hers. When she finished, he simply nodded. "You have a good heart, Alina," he said. "The world is full of people who would have turned away. You did not. That is a rare and precious thing." He helped her get a job as a cook at a small roadside diner called the Rusty Spoon. It was a far cry from the fine dining of the Gilded Spoon. The air was thick with the smell of sizzling burgers and stale coffee. The customers were truckers and construction workers, their clothes stained with grease and dirt. But in that small kitchen, surrounded by the honest warmth of the grill and the clatter of a busy kitchen, Alina found a new hope. She cooked with all the love and passion she had always dreamed of, and in David's gentle, admiring eyes, she saw the reflection of her worth, a worth that Arthur Vance had tried so hard to deny. This place, this simple diner, was where her life and her journey to true happiness would begin. The rhythmic sizzle of burgers on the greasy grill became the new soundtrack to Alina's life. The smell of sizzling onions and fresh coffee was a comforting aroma, a stark contrast to the sterile, over-perfumed air of the Gilded Spoon. In this new world, her heart began to mend, piece by agonizing piece. She worked alongside David at the Rusty Spoon, a diner that, despite its name, was filled with a certain kind of warmth. Here, her accent wasn't a flaw, but a charming curiosity. The truckers and regulars knew her name, and her food was a source of genuine joy for them. Day by day, the friendship between Alina and David blossomed. They would share stories in the quiet hours before the morning rush. He spoke of his late wife, a woman he described with a gentle, enduring love that was beautiful and heartbreaking all at once. She, in turn, told him about her family in Russia, about her grandmother's cooking and the simple beauty of her village. She didn't talk about her humiliation at the Gilded Spoon, but he saw the shadows in her eyes. He knew she was a woman who had been hurt, and he was determined to heal her. Their affection was a slow burning ember that grew warmer with each shared smile, each touch of hands as they passed a coffee pot. One evening, after the last customer had left and they were cleaning up, David finally found the courage to speak what was in his heart. The setting sun cast long golden shadows through the diner window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. "Alina," he began, his voice soft but firm, I know you've been hurt, and I know you're still healing." He took a hesitant step toward her, his gaze unwavering. "But being with you, it's like the sun came back into my life. I think I'm falling in love with you." Alina's heart soared, then ached with a familiar, painful doubt. The past, the bitter taste of Arthur Vance's words, the insecurity of her life, it all came rushing back. She saw the love in David's eyes, so pure and genuine, and she felt a deep longing to embrace it. But a voice inside her head whispered that she couldn't afford this luxury, that love was for people with stable lives, with a future. She was an immigrant, living on the edge of uncertainty, with a family depending on her. She couldn't drag him into her chaotic world. "David," she said, her voice trembling, I care about you so much." She looked away, a tear escaping her eye. "But I can't. Not now. I have too much to carry." He reached out and gently lifted her chin, forcing her to look at him. "Let me help you carry it," he whispered, his eyes pleading. "Let me share the weight." She shook her head, a silent, tearful refusal. She wasn't strong enough to open her heart again, not after it had been so brutally broken. In her mind, love was a luxury she couldn't afford. The very next day, under a sky of blinding, unapologetic blue, their world came crashing down. Alina was frying bacon when she saw a beige sedan pull up outside. Two people in uniforms got out. It was a social worker, accompanied by a police officer. Alina's hands went cold, and she dropped the spatula. She knew, with a terrible, heart-wrenching certainty, who they were there for. Ivan and Sophia were playing by the diner's back door, their laughter a sound Alina had come to cherish. The social worker approached them, her voice a calm, professional tone that couldn't mask the cold finality of her words. Ivan, ever the protector, instinctively put his arm around his sister. "Where are you taking us?" he asked, his young voice laced with fear. "To a safe place," the woman said. "A place with other children where you will have food and a bed." Ivan's eyes, filled with a primal terror, met Alina's. His silent plea for her to save them was a dagger in her heart. She ran out of the diner, her apron still on, and fell to her knees. "No," she cried. "Please don't take them. They're my family. I can take care of them." The social worker's face was kind but firm. "I'm sorry, Ma'am. We have a court order. You are not their legal guardian." Alina's heart shattered. She hugged the children, her tears soaking their thin jackets. "I love you," she sobbed into Sophia's hair. "I will never, ever forget you. I promise." Ivan, his own tears streaming down his face, clutched her. "Alina," he whispered, "you are our angel. We will never forget you either." They were gone in an instant, the beige sedan disappearing down the road, taking with it the two small beacons of hope that had sustained her. Alina felt an emptiness so vast and profound that she felt she might be swallowed whole. She had nothing left to hold on to. The city which had taken her job now took her children. In the days that followed, she felt untethered, a ghost haunting the diner. The laughter of Ivan and Sophia echoed in the silence, and their absence was a physical ache. She realized that without them, and with her heart still closed to David, she had nothing. She couldn't stay. The memories, the pain, the ghost of her public humiliation. It was all too much. She found David at the diner, working behind the counter. He saw the resolute sadness in her eyes. "You're leaving," he said, the words not a question, but a statement. Alina nodded, her eyes filled with tears. I have to find a new place, a new life, this city. It's too much for me." David came around the counter and took her hands in his. "Please don't go, Alina. Stay here, with me. We can get through this together." She pulled her hands away gently. "I can't, David. Not now." She reached up and, with a shaky hand, touched his cheek. "But I will never forget you. Ever." She leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't a passionate kiss, but a kiss of goodbye, of love, of silent promise. It was a kiss that held all the words she couldn't say. He watched her go, a small suitcase in her hand, her shoulders hunched against the weight of a world that had tried to break her. He stood there, his heart in his throat, a silent promise forming in his own mind. He would wait for her, and he would never stop looking for her. Alina left New York, leaving behind the love she couldn't accept and the family she had lost, a woman on the run, not from the law, but from her own broken heart. The air between Isabella and Leonardo had finally thawed. The office, once a battlefield of professional politeness and guarded glances, was now filled with a new, tentative kind of intimacy. Their work on the library project had become a shared journey, a way of building something together, both literally and figuratively. They spent evenings after work sketching designs, their heads close together, the scent of charcoal and her subtle floral perfume mixing in the air. Their conversations were no longer just about blueprints and budgets. They spoke of their favorite books, their childhood memories, and the quiet dreams they had each kept locked away. One evening, they were in Leonardo's penthouse, the city lights a glittering tapestry below them. Isabella was helping him organize old files, a task he had put off for years. She was humming softly to a song on the radio, her guard finally down. He watched her from across the room, a genuine, warm smile on his face, a smile that hadn't been there in years. It felt like she was a sculptor, and with every laugh, every shared silence, she was chipping away at the stone fortress he had built around his heart. She found a dusty cardboard box tucked away in the back of a closet. "What's this?" she asked, her voice light and curious. "Oh, just some old things," Leonardo said, his smile faltering slightly. "I haven't looked at that in years. You can just put it back." But it was too late. Isabella, her curiosity piqued, had already opened the box. Inside, she found a collection of memories, faded photographs of a young, beautiful woman with a vibrant smile, a collection of concert ticket stubs, and a delicate, pressed rose. At the bottom of the box, tucked inside a small velvet pouch, she found a photograph of a stunning emerald-cut diamond ring, a receipt from a jeweler attached to it. The date on the receipt was just 2 days before the accident that had taken the life of his fiancée. A sudden cold dread washed over Isabella. The humming stopped. The easy smile vanished from her face. She felt a familiar chill, the ghost of her own past, creeping back into her heart. She wasn't just a photographer in this room. She was a girl again, watching her father with a woman who wasn't her mother. She felt her chest tighten, the air suddenly thin and cold. Leonardo saw the change in her instantly. The light in her eyes, which he had worked so hard to rekindle, was gone, replaced by a wall of suspicion and pain. He walked over to her slowly, his heart sinking. "Isabella," he said softly, his voice full of a remorseful tenderness. She didn't look at him. She just held up the photo of the ring, her hand trembling. This was for her?" she asked, her voice a fragile whisper. "Yes," he admitted, his voice barely audible. He sat beside her, trying to take her hand, but she pulled away. "Her name was Clara. We were going to get married. The accident. It happened 2 days after I bought that ring." Isabella's eyes filled with tears, not of jealousy, but of fear. "I'm not her," she said, the words a raw confession. "I'm not Clara." "I know that," Leonardo insisted, his voice rising in desperation. "You're not supposed to be. Isabella, what we have is real. It's new. It's different." "Is it?" she challenged, her voice breaking. She stood up, holding the photo of the ring like a piece of evidence. "Or am I just a replacement, a way to fill the hole she left behind? Did you see me and just see a blank space where she used to be?" The accusation hit him like a physical blow. He stood up, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "Isabella, no, that's not fair. My past is part of who I am. Her memory, it will always be with me. But my future is with you. It's with this." He gestured around the room, to the blueprints of the library, to the life they were building. "It's with what we are creating together." But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it was growing fast. Her father's betrayal had taught her to be wary, and this was too much to ignore. She saw a chasm opening up between them, a chasm she didn't know if they could cross. She saw herself as a second best, a consolation prize, a stand-in for a ghost. "I can't do this, Leonardo," she said, her voice shaking with a painful resolve. "I can't be a substitute. I can't live in the shadow of a ghost." She put the box down on the coffee table, a symbolic gesture of finality. "I need to go." He reached for her, his eyes pleading. "Please, Isabella, don't let this ruin us. Don't let my past destroy our future." But her mind was made up. The walls she had worked so hard to dismantle had reformed, stronger and more impenetrable than before. She walked to the door, a cold, heavy feeling settling in her heart. She felt like she was leaving not just him, but a part of herself behind. She felt the ghost of a dead woman in the room, a silent rival she could never compete with. "Isabella, wait!" he called out, but she was already gone. The door clicked shut behind her, the sound of final, painful punctuation to the end of their fragile beginning. Leonardo was left alone in his silent, sterile apartment, the box of memories a stark reminder of the past and the chilling emptiness of the present. He had thought he was healing, but now he realized that the wounds of the past ran deeper than he had ever imagined. He had pushed her away, not with malice, but with a love he didn't know how to fully give. He had built a fortress, and now he was alone inside it, the sound of her absence echoing in the quiet. The city below Leonardo's penthouse was a symphony of chaos, a fitting backdrop for the turmoil raging inside Isabella. She had run from him, from the ghost of his past, and now she was alone with the echoes of her own. Her heart, which she had so carefully guarded, felt like a cracked and fragile thing. She spent the next few days in a haze of self-doubt, replaying every moment with Leonardo, every shared laugh, every quiet look. Was it all a lie? Was she just a replacement? The thought was a poison that seeped into every corner of her mind. A phone call broke through her haze. It was her father. "Isabella." His voice was strained, heavy with an emotion she hadn't heard in years. "Can we talk? Please, just for a few minutes. I need to explain." She hesitated, the old resentment a bitter taste in her mouth. She had built her entire life on the foundation of his betrayal. But something in his voice was different. It wasn't the dismissive tone of the man she remembered, but the plea of a man who was drowning. "Fine," she said, her voice cold. "My place. Now." When he arrived, he looked older than she remembered, his shoulders stooped, his hands trembling slightly as he held a small, leather-bound photo album. He sat on her couch, a stranger in her apartment, and looked at her with a profound sadness. "I know you hate me," he began, his voice barely a whisper, "and I've lived with that for 20 years. But there's something you need to know. Something I should have told you a long time ago." He opened the album, flipping to a faded photograph of a woman with a kind smile, a woman she vaguely recognized. "Do you remember Marie, your mother's best friend?" Isabella nodded, her heart pounding with a sudden, terrible premonition. Her husband, he was a bad man. He was abusive. He controlled her every move, every penny. One day, he threatened to take the children and disappear. Marie was terrified. She came to us, desperate. Your mother and I decided to help her. We made a plan to get her out of the city, to a safe place where she and her children could start over. He took a shaky breath, his eyes welling with tears. "The day you saw us, that day in the car, I was giving her the last of the money we had saved for her escape. She was crying, and she hugged me. It was a goodbye hug. She was leaving the next day. I know what you saw, Isabella. You saw me with another woman, a woman who wasn't your mother. You were a little girl. How could I have explained the complexity of a situation like that? How could I have told you that your mother's best friend was a victim of domestic abuse, and we were helping her escape? Your mother was afraid you would be scared. So we decided to keep it a secret. It was a mistake, the biggest mistake of my life." Isabella's world tilted on its axis. The betrayal, the foundation of her cold heart, was not a betrayal at all. It was an act of compassion. Her parents hadn't been unfaithful. They had been heroes, sacrificing their own comfort to help a friend in need. The anger she had carried for 2 decades, the resentment she had nursed like a bitter child, it all crumbled into dust. The truth was a devastating, beautiful, painful thing. She wasn't the victim of betrayal. She was the victim of a tragic misunderstanding. Tears streamed down her face, not of anger, but of a profound, soul-shattering regret. She looked at her father, at the man she had hated for 20 years, and she saw him for the first time, a man who had made a difficult choice and had paid the price for it with the love of his daughter. "Dad," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion, "I'm so sorry." "I'm sorry too, honey," he said, tears now freely running down his cheeks. "I should have told you. I should have trusted you to understand." The words of her father, a painful, beautiful truth, echoed in her mind. Her heart, that cold, impenetrable stone she had so carefully sculpted, shattered into 1,000 pieces. It wasn't the betrayal that had made her a skeptic. It was the misunderstanding. And now that misunderstanding was gone, and she was left with the devastating realization of her own folly. Her mind immediately went to Leonardo. She had accused him of loving a ghost when she herself was haunted by one. She had pushed him away, judged him, and questioned his love, all because of a lie she had believed for 2 decades. She had let her past ruin her future. She had to find him. She had to explain. She had to apologize. She rushed out of her apartment, not even bothering to put on a coat, the cold air a shock against her tear-streaked face. She called his cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. She called his office, but the secretary said he had left for the day. He seemed distant, the woman had said, her voice filled with a kind of gentle concern. She drove to his penthouse, but the lights were off, the building silent. She knocked on the door, her fist pounding a frantic rhythm against the cold metal, but there was no answer. The security guard, a kind man who had grown to admire their relationship, took pity on her. "He's not here, miss. He said he was going to that library project he's so passionate about. Said he wanted to be alone with his thoughts. Isabella's heart sank, but a spark of hope ignited within her. The library. The place where they had met, where their fragile connection had first started to grow. The place he had poured his soul into. The place where he had come to be alone with his thoughts. It was the only place she could find him. She drove through the city, the neon glare a blur of color, her mind a whirlwind of emotion. She arrived at the construction site, the half-finished building a ghostly skeleton in the pale moonlight. She climbed the temporary stairs, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. She had to tell him. She had to tell him that she finally understood, that she wasn't a replacement, that her love for him was real, and that the ghost that had haunted her for so long was finally gone. She just hoped that it wasn't too late. The aroma of fresh coffee and pastries, a scent Alina had carefully cultivated in her small cafe, suddenly felt like a distant memory. All she could focus on was the sight of Ivan and Sophia, no longer the shivering children from the alley, but two stunning, confident adults. They stood before her, the faint scent of expensive cologne and a quiet kind of power clinging to them. The Ferrari, a gleaming, impossible red, sat parked outside as if it were a natural extension of their presence. Alina's hands trembled as she wiped them on her apron. Her voice, usually so steady, was a whisper. "Ivan? Sophia? Is it really you?" Sophia, the little girl who had once clung to her side, now a poised and elegant woman, stepped forward, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "It's us, Alina. We never forgot you, not for a single day." Ivan, now a tall, handsome man with a presence that filled the small space, nodded, a gentle smile on his face. He looked around the cafe, his eyes taking in every detail, the mismatched chairs, the scent of cinnamon, the framed photo of a younger Alina on the counter. "We've been looking for you. For years." He pulled out a small, worn photograph from his wallet. It was a picture of a younger Alina, her hair tied in a simple bun, a tray of food in her hands. The image was faded, but her compassionate eyes were as clear as day. "This is how we remembered you, our angel in the alley." Alina felt a sob catch in her throat. She looked at them, at the two lives she had touched, and the magnitude of it all hit her with a powerful force. "But how? What happened to you?" she asked, her voice thick with emotion. Sophia took a deep breath, her own voice steadying. "After you left, we were placed in a foster home. It was not good. But then we were adopted by a wonderful family. They were kind, wealthy, and they believed in us." She smiled at her brother. "They saw Ivan's passion for cooking and sent him to the best culinary schools in the world. He's not just a chef, Alina. He owns a chain of restaurants now. They're called The Sanctuary. They hire and train immigrants, people who are just like we were. They're built on your story, Alina, on the kindness you showed us." Ivan nodded, his eyes fixed on Alina's. "And Sophia? She found her calling fighting for people like us. She's a highly respected immigration lawyer. She helps families stay together, make sure no child has to go through what we did." Alina was speechless. Her small act of kindness, born of a desperate need to help, had become a tidal wave of goodness, touching countless lives. She was overwhelmed, a mix of pride, joy, and a heart-wrenching sadness for the years they had been apart. Sophia stepped closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "But that's not the only reason we're here, Alina. We found you, and we also found David." The name hit Alina like a physical blow. The air in the cafe seemed to vanish, and she had to lean against the counter for support. "David?" she whispered, the name a sacred, painful memory. "You found him?" Ivan's smile widened. "He never stopped looking for you, for years. He built a successful import-export business, but he never forgot you. His business partner, a kind man who knew his story, told us that he never married. He was waiting for you. The revelation was a shock to Alina's system. She had believed that her past was a closed book, a painful chapter she had to endure alone. But here, in front of her, were two living, breathing testaments to the fact that her past was not only alive, but it was coming back to her. A frantic, desperate energy took over. "Where is he? Tell me where he is." Sophia's eyes glistened with tears. "He told us to tell you to look in your old apartment. He said he left something for you." Alina, not even bothering to close the cafe, ran out the door. The Ferrari and her two now adult children were a blur. She ran down the street, her heart a drum solo in her ears, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. She arrived at the old building, the years peeling away with every step she took up the familiar stairs. She fumbled with the key, her hands shaking so much she could barely get it in the lock. Inside, the small apartment was just as she had left it, frozen in time. The furniture was the same. The small kitchen table still had the scratch she had made years ago. And there, on the kitchen table, was a small, polished wooden box. She approached it hesitantly, her breath held in her throat. Inside the box, nestled in a bed of red velvet, was a silver locket engraved with a date, the day of their first kiss. Attached to the box was a letter, his handwriting, so familiar, so beloved. "My dearest Alina, if you are reading this, it means that by some miracle Ivan and Sophia have found you. I've been looking for you for 15 years, but I never found you. I never gave up hope. I know you were scared. I know you felt that you couldn't love me because you had nothing. But you were wrong. You had everything. You had a heart full of compassion and love, and that is more than anyone could ever ask for. I waited for you. I never married. I never stopped loving you. I'm not the simple grocer you knew. I've built a business, a good life, but it's an empty life without you. The children told me you finally have your own cafe. I hope it is the start of your dreams. I hope you found happiness, but I hope you still have a small space in your heart for me. I love you, Alina. I have always loved you." With all my love, David, tears streamed down Alina's face, a deluge of sorrow and relief. The locket was the proof. The letter was the testament. The love that she had been too afraid to accept, the love that she thought had been lost to the years, was still there, waiting for her. She clutched the letter to her chest, her heart swelling with a powerful, overwhelming emotion. He had waited for her. He had never given up hope. She was no longer a lost immigrant, a woman with a broken heart. She was a woman who had been loved, and who was finally ready to love back. The wedding was a celebration, not just of two people, but of two souls finally finding peace. It wasn't a lavish affair at some grand hotel, but an intimate ceremony held in the heart of the library Leonardo had built. The late afternoon sun filtered through the massive arched windows, illuminating the rows of books like a cathedral. The scent of old paper and fresh flowers filled the air, a beautiful metaphor for a new beginning built on the wisdom of the past. Isabella walked down the aisle, not in a traditional white dress, but in a flowing ivory gown that looked as though it were made of light. On her arm was her father, his face etched with a mixture of profound regret and overwhelming pride. He had come a long way from the stooped, broken man who had confessed his secret in her small apartment. The journey of reconciliation had been difficult, filled with tearful conversations and a slow, cautious rebuilding of trust. As they walked, he leaned down and whispered, "I am so proud of the woman you have become, Isabella. You have taught me the true meaning of forgiveness." She squeezed his hand, a silent signal that the years of pain were finally behind them. At the altar, Leonardo waited for her, his eyes shining with a love so deep and genuine that it took her breath away. He wasn't the cold, guarded man she had first met. He was a man who had faced his past, mourned his loss, and had opened his heart to a love he never thought he would find again. He had built this library not just as a monument to his career, but as a testament to the power of stories, and their story was just beginning. The reception was held on the rooftop of the library, under a blanket of stars. The city, once a symbol of their loneliness, was now a beautiful, glittering witness to their happiness. Amidst the laughter and music, Isabella and Leonardo, together with her father, announced the launch of the Clara Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to helping young, struggling artists find their footing. It was a beautiful, powerful gesture, a way for them to honor the past by building a better future, a way to ensure that Clara's memory would be a source of creation, not just of sorrow. Years passed, and their love deepened with every shared sunset, every quiet morning. They became a powerful couple, known not for their wealth or their success, but for their compassion and their commitment to their foundation. Leonardo, with Isabella's influence, began to incorporate more vibrant colors and organic shapes into his architectural designs. He was no longer just a builder of buildings, but a creator of spaces that felt alive. Isabella, in turn, found a new passion in her photography, capturing not just the beautiful images of the world, but the stories behind them, the human connections that gave them meaning. One sunny afternoon, a decade after they met, Leonardo walked into the library, his home. The air, as always, smelled of paper and polish. He saw a small figure, no more than 6 years old, sitting on the floor in a splash of sunlight, a canvas propped up in front of her. It was their daughter, Sophia, named for the wisdom and kindness of the little girl Isabella had always dreamed of being. She had her mother's dark, artistic eyes and her father's thoughtful, quiet demeanor. She was completely absorbed in her painting, her small hand holding a brush with a confidence that defied her age. She was painting a portrait of Leonardo, her father, a man with a gentle smile and kind eyes, surrounded by the beautiful, sun-drenched lines of the library he had built. Isabella, who had been watching from a distance, walked up to him and took his hand. He looked at the painting, then at his daughter, and then at his wife. The journey from that dark, confusing night to this beautiful, sun-drenched moment was a testament to the power of love, forgiveness, and the quiet courage to open a closed heart. He squeezed Isabella's hand, a silent thank you for everything she had given him. "She's just like you," he whispered, a smile on his face, a tear in his eye. "She sees the world in colors." Isabella leaned her head on his shoulder. "And she sees you, Leonardo. She sees the man you truly are." They stood there for a long time, watching their daughter paint. Two people who had overcome so much, who had built a family on the foundation of honesty and love. The library, the physical manifestation of Leonardo's dream, was a living, breathing testament to their love, a place where stories lived, and a place where their own beautiful story, a story of two broken people who found healing in each other, would continue to be written for years to come. We want to hear your opinion about this beautiful love story. Let us know what you thought of this plot full of emotions and surprises. Tell us your name, where you are watching from, and what score you would give this story from 0 to 10, a story that touched hearts. And if you enjoyed the storyline, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the amazing new stories coming up. See you next time.